All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this afternoon from OHM BOCES. Today's webinar is going to be on the interpretive communication. We're happy that you're able to join us, and we hope that you are able to get the information that you are seeking today. To start, excuse me, I'd like to present our presenters. The first is Louis Baskinger, who is our Spanish team leader. Dana Gasca, who is our World Languages program assistant here, and then myself and our director, I'm Lucille Matt, in case you don't know me, and then our director is Greg Smith. So the first of our slides today is one that you have seen before. There will be nothing that is available in the chat today. It's a Q&A button. You're going to find it on the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and you can see we've had it circled here in the blue. So any question that you happen to have, please put into the Q&A, and we will be answering questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide is our agenda. Our agenda for today will start off with the format for our Checkpoint B examination. It's going to also introduce you to our interpretive communication, what it is, how we address in the interpretive communication in our exam as well. The criteria that we use to select our stimuli. We're going to talk about the target level proficiencies, and we're going to have some sample items for you, some samples of authentic resource, and then what you might do in order to prepare your students. And then finally, our question and answer period. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Lou for the next couple slides.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to give you a few reminders. The first is our Checkpoint B examinations are available in ASL, Chinese, French, Italian, and Spanish. And our exams are aligned with the New York State Learning Standards for World Languages, the document of 2021. And they adhere to the principle and guidelines for adopting or creating locally developed benchmark assessments for Checkpoint B, dated 2025. And more information about our OHM BOCES can be found at our website. Okay, this again is a reminder. NYSED standards, the implementation timeline, everybody should be familiar with this, because especially if you're a Checkpoint A teacher while you are a Checkpoint B teacher, you've already been a couple years into the training. So this should all sound very familiar to you. And what we need to know or note here from this slide is that you actually began Checkpoint A, and last June, you gave the first Checkpoint A benchmark assessment according to the new standards and according to our new format. Now, for the school year of 2026-27, first examination in a new design and following the new guidelines will be in January of 2027. Okay. So one more reminder that our modern languages, okay, our Chinese, French, Italian, and Spanish, we were given a weight percentage by New York State, and interpretive was 40%, interpersonal 30%, and presentational 30%. Okay, and they gave us guidelines for interpretive, okay, as being anywhere from 15 to 20%. Okay, and for interpretive reading, that was the listening, and for the reading, for 20 to 25%. So what we're looking at in our examination is that interpretive will be 24% and our interpretive listening will be 16%. So that means that shows a big difference in what previously happened. Our listening passages are going to count as 1 point, and our reading will stay as 2 points. Okay? Any question from my colleagues?
No,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Okay. There you go.
I'm going to take us through a brief overview of the format of interpretive communication. So only that section of the exam that we're talking about today. We do have a webinar that we did earlier in the year about interpersonal communication. If you want to check that out, it's on our website. And we will be doing one about presentational communication later this year. So for today, we're just looking at the interpretive. And this is the release format that we have for category 1-2 languages. So that would be French, Italian, and Spanish. So this is our current format. There may be some minor changes to this, but we are generally expecting this is our format for next year. But as we work with the new standards, of course, we are having lots of discussions about these. So interpretive communication is worth 40%. So this is a mandate from New York State. It has to be worth 40%. And as Lou mentioned, we are going to have 16 questions for part 2, interpretive listening. And then we are going to have 12 questions for part 3, interpretive reading. Part 2 will be worth 1 point per multiple choice question. And part 3, the reading, will be 2 points for each question. So looking at part 2, interpretive listening, there is a choice for this section. Teachers may read aloud the listening passages to their students, or a proctor may play a pre-recorded audio file for students. And this audio file is created with a heritage speaker reading the exam items. Looking down at the format for part 2, interpretive listening, we've split it into 2 parts. So we have a part 2A and a part 2B. For part 2A, we're going to have 10 questions and answers in English. And for part 2B, there are 6 questions, and all the questions and answers will be in the target language. Moving over to the interpretive reading, students are going to read short passages, infographics, and/or advertisements in the target language. This section is split into 3 parts. We have part 3A, where there will be 2 medium-length passages that each have 2 questions. And all of these questions and answers are in the target language. Part 3B are 4 questions. We will have 4 infographics or advertisements with 1 question each. And all of these questions and answers are in English. And then finally, for part 3C, we will have 1 long passage with 4 questions, and all of these questions and answers will be in English as well. So that's the format again for category 1-2 languages. For category 3-4, this will be only for our Chinese exams at this point. ASL is also a category 3-4 language, but we do not yet have the guidelines for the development of the exam from New York State. They do expect to release these guidelines for American Sign Language soon. And once it has been released, we will be able to work to get our format together for ASL. And we will make an announcement once we have that ready for everyone. So this right now is category 3-4, but again, this is only for Chinese. This is the only exam we have at this point. You'll notice that everything is pretty much the same. The only difference, I'm going to focus your attention down to interpretive reading. And the only difference is in part 3C, instead of that long passage with 4 questions, we're going to have 2 medium length passages, just like part 3A. The only difference is going to be in part 3A. The questions have, questions and answers are in the target language. And in part 3C, the questions and answers will all be in English. So again, that is our format for interpretive communication. And now we're going to look at how we select stimuli for the exams. So all stimuli on the exams are only authentic resources. They must reflect the proficiency levels. And we do have a requirement on the exams you'll see in a little bit. There has to be so many questions that are at, the target proficiency level and so many that are at the passing proficiency level. Questions or stimuli will be relatable to students. So either their daily life or through instruction, things that they are familiar with, that they've learned about in the classroom. And you'll see that we follow the themes and topics from New York State World Languages Standards. So that will give you an idea of the content on the exam. We try to give a broad representation of all the topics. You will find some cultural content as well on the exams. And some of the resources may be chunked. And we'll talk about what that means shortly. What does it mean to chunk a resource? So a couple notes before we move on. Number 1 is that there may be errors in grammar or there may be regionalized vocabulary that you find in authentic resources. So while we do make every effort to select authentic resources that are error-free, it does happen more often than you might think. Native speakers make mistakes too. I know I make plenty of mistakes in English. So occasionally we do come across a resource that has an error in it, and we look at it and we say, this is such a good resource. We really want to use this, even though there is this minor error. So you may see those. We do make sure that if there is an error, that we take into consideration, is this going to affect the student's understanding in any way? Will this be a negative for them? And if it is, then we're not going to use it on the exam. So we're careful about that. We will also have a statement on the exam that you can read at the beginning of the exam, just to give students a heads up that there might be something on there like that. And the second thing that I wanted to bring everyone's attention to is that each stimulus, each item includes at least 1 clue to the correct answer. So we do try to have more than 1 clue. For years, it's been our standard to have at least 2 clues. We'd like to have more if we can, but with authentic resources, it may not be possible. So while most will probably have 2 clues, some may only have 1 clue. And clues may be direct, or they may be a little more indirect. So, okay. I'm going to hand it back over to Lucille to talk about authentic resources.
Yes, authentic resources. I know you have heard of this before. You've perhaps even seen this slides if you have been with us for previous webinars or even some of our local network meetings. But an authentic resource, exactly what is it? By definition, it is something that has not been edited in any way or even simplified for the level of the students who are going to be reading it. Authentic resources can be a text, they can be audio, they can be a visual format. But the most important thing is that they have been created for the target language and the target culture. In other words, they were not created for the purpose of learning materials. They were created to be used by those individuals that are born into that native language. So created, for example, by a French person for the reading or the viewing of another French person. Age wouldn't matter if it was, for example, an elementary text versus an adult text. Next slide, please. So we ask ourselves, what can be an authentic resource? And there are many different types of resources that we can use. Advertisements, articles, they could be from a magazine, from a newspaper, coming from blogs, children's books, infographics, of which there are usually many, menus, recipes, news programs, podcasts, radio programs, even coming from YouTube. We could have transcripts of that YouTube presentation. There could be signs or even just plain videos that are short enough for us to include in TV shows. What is not an authentic resource is probably the most important one. Nothing coming from a textbook that you are using in your classroom or have used in your classroom or is meant to be used in a classroom. Any type of graded readers, and especially at Checkpoint B, which we're discussing today, most of us have those types of resources in our classrooms. While they are still good resources for practice, they may not be used on an exam. Any language learning website that you might happen to use or find, you cannot use any of the material from that website. In any of your own personal teacher-created materials, on which we work very hard to create these materials, but unfortunately, they may not be used either. Next slide, please. So what do we look for when we're looking for an authentic resource? And these are tips for you as well, because you're going to be using authentic resources in your curriculum on a regular basis now. So how do you go about finding these? So the first thing you want to look at is the complexity of the structure. What's in that text? What am I going to look at? What things are going to be difficult for the student? Tenses. What tenses are in this narrative? And are the tenses that I know that my students are going to be able to understand? Now, do they have to know everything? No, but the primary tenses that are going to be needed for comprehension should be tenses that they might know. Multi-clause sentences. When you have a simple sentence, it lowers the proficiency level. When you have a multi-clause sentence or a compound sentence, it increases the proficiency level. Does the passage have a lot of transition words where you've got first, second, then, next, etc.? Those are all transitional words that students need to be familiar with. And what is the register? Is the register formal? Is it informal? Is it business style? Is it something that the student has ever seen before? Look at the overall level of the vocabulary. You don't want to select something for checkpoint B that only has checkpoint A vocabulary in it. You're looking for something that has a mixture. Does the passage have cognates, which would help in the proficiency level to lower that level? And then again, of course, the length of the passage. In the past, we have had much longer passages than you are going to see on the upcoming exams. In our transitional exam for 2026, we have looked at the length and lowered the length of passages. But that will change even further in 2027 when we have our official opening of the new format of our exam. So it is important, you can see here in blue, the difficulty of the authentic text. It does influence, excuse me, how the student is going to perform on this, the complexity of the questions that are asked. All right, we need to look at all of these things in order to have a text that is going to be suitable for the level at which we are writing our exam. Next passage, please. Okay, so chunking. It's an odd expression, all right? But what does it mean? We're going to literally take pieces of a text and link them together. We can eliminate words, phrases, even whole sentences. So it's the practice of using unedited and unsimplified portions of an authentic resource. We cannot change anything. So the authentic resource remains the same. We are literally taking a scissors and cutting out the parts that are extraneous to this narrative that we wish to use. So we're trying to make a more complex content more accessible to our learners. We're trying to, in our very nice lingo here, decrease cognitive load. We don't want to overwhelm the students. We want them to be able to look at the text and say, all right, I don't know everything here, but I do know a lot of things. And we also want to train our students to do just that, to look at what they do know and not fret about what they don't know. We are going to try to remove the irrelevant content. That's the portions of the narrative of the text that is unrelated to what we're dealing with as far as our goal is concerned. So we want to remove those things that could be stumbling blocks for our students. But we are not permitted to change any words. We cannot simplify an adjective that is more difficult with one that is more simple. We just can't do that anymore. That makes the test naturally a little more difficult. Next slide, please. I'm going to use this example, and I'm going to show you how we at OHM would chunk this example. In the state of Virginia, there's a very old tree in the outskirts of the city of Richmond. It is called Fairy Tree. It's 300 years old. The tree is important because rare birds live in its branches. The red-flanked bluebird is often seen in the branches of the fairy tree. Many people, including students, love this tree. Last Tuesday, city leaders had a meeting. They decided to protect the tree. Now workers cannot cut it down to build a parking lot. Local students are very happy because they worked hard to save it. They feel that the tree is testimony to Richmond's history. So here's a very lovely narrative. The length is good. We like a lot of this, but we need to pare it down a little bit. So we're going to chunk it. Next slide, please. So we're going to take out all of the difficult language or parts of this narrative that we consider to be irrelevant to our question and to the main idea of what's going on. So highlighted in red are the things that we're going to, highlighted in yellow, it's been a long day, are the parts that we are going to be taking out of this narrative. So if you look just at the first sentence, in the state of Virginia, there is a very old oak tree. I'm going to start my sentence with there is a very old oak tree. And I'm going to put a period at the end of that. And according to New York State, I can make a capital letter. I can insert punctuation wherever necessary. So after having looked at this, we're going to go to the next slide, and you're going to see how we pared it down. Next slide, please. Okay, so here is our chunked version. There is a very old tree. It is 300 years old. You can see the simplicity of these two sentences. It doesn't scare the students right away. The tree is important because rare birds live in its branches. This sentence, because of the word because, enhances the proficiency level. It brings it up. Many people, including students, love this tree. Once again, the words including students. But why did we leave these in there? Because we feel that the students can first understand it and might need this information. Last Tuesday, city leaders had a meeting. They decided to protect the tree. Now workers cannot cut it down to build a parking lot. Local students are very happy because they worked hard to save it. So on the right-hand side, you're going to see a graph. You're going to see the term that is a proficiency level term, and you're going to see the identification that is in the passage of this topic. For example, the topic of this passage is the tree. We could have said the oak tree. All right. Why? This is basically the breadth of the entire passage that we have selected. The second term down is the main idea. The city decided to save the oak tree. Okay, that's my main idea. My topic is the tree, and my main idea is that the city decided to save it. That's the anchor. That's the central point of the story, is the tree that was wanted to be cut down to make a parking lot is now saved. Next is key information. The meeting was Tuesday. The tree is protected and there's no more parking lot. All right, so what is key information? Specific points that are necessary to understand the main idea of taking down this tree and not having to do that. And then we have a term called related details. You're going to see these terms for the next several slides, and we will explain them further each time. Rare birds live there. Students are happy. Those are related. Are they necessary to understand the overall meaning of this passage? No, but they certainly lend an elaboration of what is happening in this story. So it's background information that adds flavor to the story. Is it absolutely necessary to have it? Not really, all right? But it helps me to understand the reasons why certain things are going on. Next slide, please. Okay, at this point, I think I'm turning it over to Lou. Lou,
Yes.
you're muted. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So what Lucille is saying or has said is we go through this process of chunking, and one of the main reason, not just to simplify a passage, not simply to shorten it, but it's to make sure that it falls within our standard and our proficiency level, our ratings, okay? So our standard one, interpretive communication, we have three basic language functions of understanding, interpreting, and analyzing. So learners understand, interpret, and analyze what is heard, read, received, or viewed on a variety of topics using a range of diverse texts. So everything we've done to this point is a summary, or what we've said to you is summarized here in this standard. And remember, we're talking authentic resources for everything, okay? Let's move to the next. So we have this chart here, proficiency checkpoint and benchmark assessment ratings. We have for checkpoint B, passing rating for benchmark assessment and target rating. So for our category 1 and 2 languages, our passing is set at intermediate low. And this is what the state has said. And for our target rating, what we are hoping we're directing our entire curriculum upon at this checkpoint B is intermediate mid. Category 3 and 4 languages are Chinese, okay, which is a more difficult language. The state has lowered the proficiency levels so that for passing, it's at novice high, and for our benchmark, okay, it is at intermediate low. So in the interpretive reading and interpretive listening sections, category 1 and 2, 2/3 of the items that we put on our exams are aligned to intermediate low, and only 1/3 to intermediate mid. That again is the constraint that New York State has given us. So what does this mean? Well, it means that as a classroom teacher, I should begin to think about these targets. And when I create my own classroom assessments, I should make sure that I'm in this range, so that this is no surprise when my students come to take this exam, and that my coursework is not above the level that that my students really are expected to perform. Okay? Let's go on if we could. So here we go again. Okay, for intermediate mid, again, this is category 1, 2. I can, as a can-do statement, I can understand the main idea and the key information. What Lucille talked about before when she was showing you what is main idea, what's the key information. In short, straightforward informational and literary text and conversation that are spoken, written, or signed. And for intermediate low, I can identify the topic, main idea, and related information. Difference of key information to related. From simple sentences, another change between the two categories, okay? In short and formal texts and conversations that are spoken, written, or signed. Our function, it's etc. Our text type. Okay, for targets for category 3 and 4, where the targets are different, are lowered, I can identify the topic, main idea, and related information from simple sentences and short informational texts and conversations that are spoken, written, or signed. This is now for intermediate low. And then for novice high, I can identify the topic and some isolated facts in short informational and literary texts, as well as understand familiar questions and statements from simple sentences in conversations that are spoken, written, or signed. It's a lot to absorb all at once, okay? So my proficiency levels, what does this do with my proficiency levels at checkpoint B? Intermediate, mostly familiar topic, short, straightforward texts or conversations. Okay? Straightforward, simple, or loosely connected sentences, highly predictable, literal information, such as schedules, basic news, instructions, etc. Okay? I can understand the main idea, the central point of a text, usually expressed as a longer phrase or full sentence. And key information, the specifics, the information required to successfully complete a task. Again, you have to read this over a few times to absorb. Intermediate mid is the target rating for categories 1 and 2. So let's take a look at a question. And our first sample is a main idea. And here's the text in Spanish. If you're a Spanish speaker, please read it and don't look at your English. If you don't understand Spanish, then look at the English text. Okay, this will help you better to understand or feel or put yourself in the position of your student. So I will quickly read it to you in Spanish. Mercado de la cebada. Respeta a los clientes y a los comerciantes. Los gritos, carreras, pelotas, patinetes, etc. molestan y entorpecen las compras y el trabajo de los compañeros. No dejes a tus hijos sin supervisión en el mercado ni en el parque. Puede ser peligroso para ellos, dado que usamos maquinaria para realizar nuestro trabajo. So, here is an example of a question that's a main idea. And our question is, what is the reason for this sign on the market door? Well, when I go and I look, where do I find this information? What are key words or expressions that all students should be able to understand would be the idea, number one, a tus hijos, no dejes a tus hijos, and supervisión. Although there may be words in here that are unfamiliar, as this is an authentic source, I'm sure that at Checkpoint B, very few students would really be exposed to the verb entorpecer. So I am able to find my answer simply with the clues of tus hijos and supervisión. So my answer is to tell parents to watch their children in the market. Without supervision, to watch them, to guard them. And tus hijos, your children. So your children you have to be parents. Muy fácil. Muy fácil. Okay? This actually was a question taken from our January, our past January examination, where we, for practice, have already moved to the new guidelines for 2027. Okay.
Before you move to the next slide, can you just hold on this slide for 1 second, please? I'd like to pause for just a second and ask those of our participants to think of what is the meaning of the words related information and related details. Just take a minute, not even a minute. Just see if you can remember. We've mentioned them now multiple times. What is the difference between related information and related details? Okay, next slide, please.
Well, first, before we go on, somebody likes this resource, and I'm glad. I actually took that picture when I was at the Mercado this past January.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And I'm also glad you did. I thought you were interrupting me, Lucille, to criticize my pronunciation. But anyway. Okay, so let's
No,
look at
Lou.
okay. Okay. So
No.
let's look at
But whoever that was that complimented you on your picture taking ability has just fed your ego even more.
that's right. That's right. Okay.
All right. I'm going to talk about proficiency levels as well for Checkpoint B. But I'm going to go through and explain to you in even more detail, as you're going to see as we approach the next slide. First of all, I'm going to talk about intermediate low. And I'm going to talk about it being the necessity for it to being a familiar topic. All right. What is a familiar topic? It's a text that is having a brief message in it, something that isn't complex, and the students can look at and say, oh, okay, I can get this. There are simple sentences in it, and it's short, and it oftentimes is a text or a conversation. So the topic is the subject matter, the content of what it is we're going to be communicating to the students. And then underneath that, you're going to find two things rather. You're going to find related information and related details. These two things are very important for us to understand. First of all, related information elaborates. It's going to give you more information. It's going to be able to help you to illustrate what is going on in that passage. It's going to help you fully understand what that passage is trying to say by enhancing the material that's already there. Is it necessary material? No, it's not. It's going to be extraneous material that is going to lend itself to an elaboration that is going to help. But you can still come across with your main idea, your topic, and your related details without the related information. So look at the related details. Related details are facts that are directly related to the main idea. There's my difference. These are necessary for me to understand my main idea, where the related information is not. All right? So once again, we're going to reiterate again for the intermediate low. You'll see it in the bottom left of your screen. The intermediate low is the passing rating for categories 1 and 2, and it's the target rating for 3 and 4. We say this over and over again just to help you. There's so many new words that we have to process in our mind as we go into 2027. New slide, please. So for those of you who are still a little confused, Greg Smith came up with this analogy, and we liked it, and we inserted it into our PowerPoint. Think of an outline. Those Roman numerals that are in the very beginning, those are the topics that are going to be covered in this outline. The A, B, and C in capital letters, those are the main ideas that we need to know. 1, 2, and 3 is key information, without which I'm not going to totally understand my main idea. My related details are important because they link back to the main idea. And the only thing that is extraneous here is my elaboration of related information. And that's going to help me pull it all together at the end. So this slide, I think, is an important one as a visual to help you to understand the hierarchy of these words and what they might mean. Okay, next, please. All right. So just as Lou had a question on the main idea, this question is going to be on related information. So I have a narrative here with a setting that says, while watching YouTube in Lyon, France, the video is interrupted by the following advertisement. And you hear, this is a listening question. It's in French, and at the bottom is the English translation. All right. I'm going to read it in French at this point, and you are going to, if you are a French speaker, read along with me. And if you are not a French speaker, you have the English at the bottom. Ici à Team Square, nous cherchons de nouveaux employés énergétiques et enthousiastes. Nous avons besoin d'un ingénieur commercial. Cet individu serait responsable des comptes de Microsoft. Le candidat devrait être diplômé de niveau Bac plus 5 de type École supérieure de commerce. Il doit avoir de l'expérience dans le domaine commercial. Cette personne devrait aussi être bonne en informatique et pouvoir bien parler et bien écrire le français et l'anglais. What is highlighted in yellow in the green screen are the points that lead to our answer. So let's look at our question. À qui s'adresse cette publicité? Whom is this advertisement addressing? This is a French question. more difficult by the mere fact that it is in the target language. À quelqu'un qui est bon en technologie et en langue. 2. À quelqu'un qui aime beaucoup voyager dans d'autres pays. 3. À quelqu'un qui aime enseigner l'anglais aux jeunes. 4. À quelqu'un qui est professeur de mathématiques à l'université. So, someone who is good in technology and in languages, someone who likes to travel a lot to other countries, someone who likes to teach English to young people, and someone who is a professor of mathematics at a university. And our answer is 1, someone who is good in technology and in languages. And you can see by our underlinings, these are the words that lead our student to that question. All right. There was one other thing I wanted to point out to you here is as you go through very early on in this presentation, we talked to you about how to look and hunt for a particular authentic resource. If you look at this, I think those of you who are non-French speaking can pick out many cognates in this passage. Énergique, enthousiaste, individu, commercial, ingénieur, le candidat, diplômé, etc. All right. So this, when we found this, we thought this is a good text because there's cognates in here that the student is going to be able to use to his or her benefit. All right. We looked at this and we said, oh, look at that. There is the conditional tense here, which is the tense that is taught at checkpoint B. Le candidat devrait. All right, so the student needs to know first the word devoir and what it means, all right, and then be able to put it into the conditional tense and know what that means. So at the bottom, you say, there's the word again, cette personne devrait, would or should be able to be good in informatique et pouvoir bien parler et bien écrire le français et l'anglais. All right, I think we go on to the next slide, please. And I think this was dedicated to me as well. This is the Italian question. It's a topic question. So your Italian host, mother, is telling you something about her home city. And she says, all right, this time I'm going to read the English to you. If we have any Italian teachers here, please read it in Italian. The Genoese focaccia with holes and a crispy crust is a typical recipe of Genoese cuisine. In Genoa, every bakery sells focaccia, and the locals enjoy it at any time of the day. Even the typical Genoese breakfast features focaccia, as do snacks and the classic Genoese aperitif with a glass of white wine. Our question is, what does your host mother explain to you? When people usually eat focaccia in Genoa, the history of the city of Genoa, where to find good focaccia in Genoa, and the best breakfast places in Genoa. And the answer is when people usually eat focaccia in Genoa. And our answers are backed up by the words, all right, you can see them there. Enjoy it at any time of the day. Typical Genoese breakfast, snacks, classic Genoese aperitif. They might not know what aperitif means, but they do know that it's with a glass of white wine. So therefore that helps them as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take us through Novice High. So this is only for category 3-4 languages. Novice High is the passing rating for category 3-4. If you teach category 1-2, you might know that this is checkpoint A. This is your target rating for checkpoint A. So for Novice High, Questions are going to deal with familiar topics, things that students, are very close to their daily life, school, shopping, food, those kinds of very familiar topics. At this level, students should be able to understand simple sentences, so very basic subject, verb, object thoughts. And the main focuses, the functions, are to identify the topic and to identify isolated facts. So the topic, as was mentioned for the intermediate low topic, is just simply, what is this about? What's the content area of this resource? Could be really short, 1 word, 2 words, or it could be a little bit of a longer phrase. The school schedule. It's hobbies enjoyed by high schoolers. So very basic topic. And then isolated facts are discrete pieces of information that students can identify. Now, they may not understand everything else around it, but they can pull out that specific fact. So, for example, they might not understand what the whole resource is about, but they can pull the price out. They know how much this item costs, or they might know this is the opening time for this particular store. They might not know what the store is, maybe, but they know what time it opens. So those are your isolated facts. Again, this is the passing rating for category 3-4. So here I have a little example in Chinese. So this is a topic question. So this is a study that was conducted where students in China were given a survey to complete about how often they exercise. So you notice a lot of the key words, a lot of the, words that students need to complete the question are repeated in here. We see a lot of sports, right? We see a lot of college students, college students, 大学生, we see 运动, right? So students should be able to look at this, and they may not understand exactly what they're talking about or who, they might not know it's about how often or how much, but they can tell, oh, they're definitely talking about sports and they're definitely talking about college students. So looking at the question, what is it about? It's the exercise habits of college students. So the other distractors, they are related, but students have enough information to say, no, it's not. It's not about Olympics. They don't mention anything about the Olympics. They're not talking about any places to go. So this is just a very basic topic question. Okay, so we're going to move into preparing your students. So what are some classroom practices that you can do to get students prepared for this section of the exam? Introduce authentic resources all year, the whole year, from the very beginning. Make sure that you're starting with authentic resources. They should see them in the classroom on a regular basis. They should be used for all sorts of different activities. Try to put them on your exams as well when you're preparing. You want to try to keep as much of the original text as possible when you're chunking. Of course, take out things that are unrelated or that might confuse your students. But the most you can, try to keep it in there. Try to train your students to work around the things that they don't know, to try to zero in on the parts that they know and see if they can figure out what the resource is and what it's being used for. You can use specific parts of a resource for different purposes. You can use, one chunk of it for one activity. You can use something, another part of it for another activity, or you can use the same part for different activities. You will want to use scaffolding to help students access difficult material. So you can do this in a variety of different ways. You can provide them with vocabulary that you want to pre-teach. You could give them graphic organizers to work through, but you want to give them those basic supports so that they can understand what they need to understand of the resource when you do the activity in class. And then finally, let your curriculum guide your selection of authentic resources. At the beginning of the year, you might want to take a look at all of your topics and say, okay, well, I'm doing this unit about food. We're talking about restaurants. I'm going to go find some menus. I'm going to find, reviews of restaurants and kind of gather those resources before you start. So we're going to go through, we have a couple different activities that we'll show you. Hopefully we'll get you thinking about it and give you some things to try in class. So I believe Lucille is going to talk about the first activity. So I'll hand it back over to you.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. So this activity is basically for the main idea. And if you have a text, whether it's a small text or a paragraph or several paragraphs, or you can even do this in checkpoint C with an entire story. You're going to give the students a list of just the key words and phrases that might be found in a short, authentic resource. It can be reading, it can be listening. You're going to post those on your whiteboard. And then you're going to ask the students, what do they think these words might mean? And inevitably, there's always someone who is a little more astute than some of the others and might say, I think it might be this. And you say yes or no, but then you're going to write those words on the board. You're going to define those key words. All right, then you're going to have the students go into groups, small groups. When I say small group, I mean not more than 3. All right, and you're going to ask them to discuss what they think based on those key words this story might be about. So they've got the key words and they're going to brainstorm for about 5 minutes. And then you're going to ask each group to share their ideas in 1 or 2 sentences. What is the main idea of this story? Then you're going to go back to the whole class and say, all right, we've got 3 groups that think that it might be this, 2 groups that think that it might be that. Let's put those 2 together and see if we can come up with what we think might be the right one. And then, of course, you read it, and then you congratulate those students that were able to come up with a storyline based on those key words. So you can do this alternately too. You can take this resource and say to the small groups, okay, now you pick out the key words that you think are important for you to understand this story. So it is something that can go both ways. You can do it with the words first, or you can do it with the narrative first. And I'm going to pass this back now to Dana.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go through a couple more activities, classroom activities. So this one is a good one for the main idea and for your key information. Students are really used to using social media, reading posts, posting things, creating things. So this should be something that is very familiar to them. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to find an authentic resource of some kind. So it could be an infographic, could be an advertisement, just something that's, short that may be posted to social media, that kind of thing. Again, you want to break your students into some groups to kind of look over the resource, discuss it, see if they can figure out what is it about, what does it mean. They can circle words that they know, they can, see if they can jot down what they think it's about, that kind of thing. And then each group is going to write a short title that they would use if they were going to post the resource to social media. So this is them picking out the main idea. What is the resource about? And then finally, you can also have students create hashtags for the resource. And this is, just a little key information. So what are the key words, the key phrases that they find in this resource that they would use? I think students can kind of relate to this activity, and they can get pretty animated when they're talking about this kind of thing. But you could put it in, all sorts of units. Lots of different kinds of resources would work great for this activity. Okay, a couple more activities, and these are getting more to topic, having students identify the topic of a authentic resource. So for reading, you could provide students with several different infographics, short readings, advertisements, anywhere from 5 to 10. You can just pull all sorts of different ones and have the students to work together to sort them into categories, right? So, okay, this one is about, hobbies. This one is about shopping. This one is about going to the restaurant. This one's about cooking at home. You can really look at your curriculum and see what kind of topics. It could be, you could provide them with the topics. So, that can kind of guide them and help you control the difficulty of the task. So you could pick easier topics if you want it to be a little easier activity, or you could pick topics that are a little bit closer, where they have to do a little bit more to distinguish which topic it should be, and have the students just sort them into groups. Now you could do this as a race between groups. You could have one group on one side of the class working and another group on the other side, and see how quickly they can do this, and whoever does it first. You could do it as a class. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do this activity. Another activity would be for listening. So you could provide your students with a list of keywords. Now, some of these words should be related to your passage, and some of them should be unrelated. They could be close or they could be far away, again, depending on how difficult you want to make the activity. And then you want to read the passage to the students. And as they are listening to you reading, they should check off what are the key words that they heard when you read the passage. And then finally, at the end, they're going to have this checklist, and these are the words that they heard in the passage. And they're going to work together to figure out what is the topic. What is this passage about? And so it kind of helps them to figure out the topic by kind of focusing on what are those key words, what are those key phrases that are important to figure out what the topic is. So this is just a couple small activities for the topic. And then we have a few additional classroom activities that you can try. So simple true false works great. You can do just related details or small things that you want students to pick up on in the text and do some true false with it. Information gap activities I really love, especially when you add like a role play element to it. So for example, you can grab some authentic menus when you're doing your restaurant. Go on and actually find menus that are from the target cultures, and just give them to the students and have them do a role play where one person is the waiter or waitress at the restaurant and the other students are coming in and they have to order something from the menu. It's really good for having them practice using those resources when they generate language. Another good one would be like schedules of some kind. So like you have a train schedule, right? And they want to buy a ticket. And so you're asking, well, where are you going? What time is it? How much is it going to be? All those kinds of activities are great. You can have students read a short picture book. Some of these are more accessible than others. So, just because it's a book for children does not mean that it's going to be necessarily easy for our language learners. But there are some really good ones out there that have very basic language that are meant for heritage heritage children. And students can read these and just write a short review. What did they think about it? Did they like it? Did they not like it? Is it interesting? Would they recommend it to their friends? And then students can, kind of trade around with each other, read the reviews from other students and see if it's something they want to read, and then they could read another book. Another activity you could do is to have students find authentic resources themselves and share it with the class. This is a really good one. You can say we're learning, we're doing shopping, so go on some different stores from the country and see what you can find, or maybe short news articles. Find a target language newspaper. And then finally, target language surveys. Surveys are really good. They often are very easy to understand. There's, it's usually presented in a way that is organized well for students, and have them read through the survey and see, what did the people in the target culture, what do they think about this topic? And then they can compare with their classmates and their own experience. Is it the same for us? If you find a survey like the one I showed for Chinese, there was the how often do the students exercise in China? And you could have a discussion in your class about students in their school and themselves, right? So do they themselves exercise this many times a week? Where would they fall? So those, I think, are a lot of good little activities that you can try. And we would like to remind everyone that you can use the same authentic resource for multiple activities. So you can start with easier skills. You might want to give them at first, just give them the resource and have them identify cognates. What are the words that you can pull out that you understand? What do you think that this might be about? And then finally, you get into more, what's the topic of it? What's the key information? And then finally, maybe students can use the resource to do something, to do an activity, right? Like I mentioned the last one, discussing with the class about the survey, things like that. So this really helps students build confidence, starting with these easier skills. They can say, oh, I can understand some of this, and it kind of takes a little bit of the weight off their shoulders and lets them easier, work into that difficulty level. So, okay, so we're gonna move on.
We would just like to remind you that we do have another webinar this school year. It'll be scheduled for May 27th, same time frame as this one, and this will be our final one for the school year on presentational communication for Checkpoint B. If you happen to miss one or want to review one of our past webinars, they can be found on our website and it's listed for you there. All right. So now at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Greg Smith, who is going to call us on various questions that may have been put in the chat or the Q&A. I keep saying chat, sorry.
That's okay. There really weren't any questions. There was a couple of people that were happy with what was presented and happy with the resource that Lou selected with his fantastic photography skills. But no, there were really any questions. There was a mention that the listening activity Dana was talking about was really a good activity, not just for students in the general education, but also for students who have IEPs and need more structure. So.
Okay.
Lou,
you're muted.
Yes, I muted myself because my dog was starting to bark.
No, I meant Lou. He had his hand up.
I would like to make a comment on something that Dana brought up about having your students look for authentic resources. One of the most difficult things for us to do is to find a resource, only because it requires so much time. So if I decide to give my class of 20 students the assignment to find some authentic resource that has to do with timetables or signs that you might find, like my sign on a store door, et cetera, maybe that night for homework, the kids will spend 15, 20 minutes to find a resource. It may be a good one and it may not. But what it does is the next day, it gives me 20 resources. And I may not be able to use it right then and there the next day, but I can put it into my bank and say, this will work with when I get to for example, if I'm teaching commands and I want to do more than just put up commands on the blackboard or the smartboard. I want to show them an authentic resources that use the commands together. I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in my file. So I think that having your students do this work is a time saver for you, and it's a great way to build up your resources that you may use next year or next week.
That's a great suggestion. One thought I had, actually, there was a Q&A that just came up. Let's see, for next year's Regents examinations, which is probably to say the checkpoint examinations, the listening comprehension could be pre-recorded or read by the teachers. So I can field that one. We always pre-record our listening comprehension for our exams. So if you're talking about any other vendor created exams, or if you're creating exams locally at your school, that's something that you'd have to decide on your own locally for your own local exams, or if it's a vendor created exam, you'd have to check with the vendor. But for our OHM created exams, we've always pre-recorded them, and the audio is actually spoken by a heritage speaker or signer of the language, but read or signed at a level or a speed that's appropriate for either checkpoint A or checkpoint B exams.
If I can,
The
if I
passages are not, however, available to teachers any more than 1 hour in advance of when the exam is administered. So that constraint is pretty limiting in terms of creating a local recording of our OHN exams. So that's kind of a deal breaker. But that said, the recordings that we provide are available on Buzz and can be accessed by the administrators at the school and distributed out for your use during the administration.
If I can add to that, Greg, if you do happen to use our OHM exam and you have never used our audio recordings, I think it's worth a listen to them. They are very good. Our heritage speakers they speak very succinctly, very easily understood. They're very easily understood. So listen to them. It might make a less stressful day for you to use the recordings as opposed to speaking them yourself.
And Dana, I'll let you field the question here. Are there examples that we can check out?
Examples of the exams? Um,
Unclear. I was
Unclear.
assuming it was on the topic of the audio passages, but I mean, I guess the answer is the same either way.
Well, so
Well,
we
similar.
Yeah. So we do have a sample examination on our website that you can look at that doesn't have the audio on it. It's just the PDF, the full PDF. But on Buzz, we do have some past exams, and the audio files are on there. Not all of our past exams on there. We're working very hard to get them all updated, but we do have a good amount that you can go ahead and take a listen to. If you need help finding them, just let us know. We'd be happy to help.
Yep. And who has access to Buzz that would be able to access past audio files?
So the teachers, anybody on the exam, so administrators and teachers do have access to past exams. It's just the one for the current year that's only available to administrators.
And school does need to order the exams in order for us to know who the
Yes.
teachers and the administrators are. So
Yes.
there's that prerequisite.
If your school has ordered exams and you didn't get an email to access Buzz, you can let us know. Sometimes they don't always put the teachers list everybody, so you can let us know.
Yes. So there's a couple more things that came in. One person said they need help finding the audio, so thank you in advance. It'd be best probably if you sent an email to us or put a help ticket in, so that we can follow up with you directly.
I'll put our emails on here.
Yep,
You can email
excellent.
me. You can email me directly. I'll help you find them. So
And she is Dana, just to remind
yes.
everyone. Um, A thought I had that you guys might want to circle back to. Each of you presented the characteristics of the three main proficiency levels that our Checkpoint B exams are based on: novice high, intermediate low, and intermediate mid. You presented the characteristics and you also gave an example question. One thing that all of you, or maybe one of you, might want to circle back to is going back to at least one of those examples and talking about why that particular item, which is to say the passage and the question in combination, is novice high. Why that particular item is intermediate low. And what are the characteristics? What's going through your mind when you evaluate a passage? What's going through your mind when you evaluate the proficiency level of a question? And how teachers might be able to draft questions and select items, select passages on their own that meet these proficiency level characteristics.
Well, if you go back to the French one, it was early on, the team square. Okay. And I need to enlarge this on my screen. There we go. Okay. If you go back and look at this, when we underlined the words that were meaningful for getting the question correct, the majority of them are either cognates or checkpoint A vocabulary. Engineer, they've learned usually in level 1 when they learned professions. Responsible is a cognate as well. They might not know compte, but they are going to know Microsoft, and Microsoft is going to conjure up something in their mind as a tech company. And then bonne and informatique, also usually checkpoint A. Bien parler and bien écrire, le français et l'anglais. Those are also words that are very common to the student. There are very few words in here that is going to make this a very difficult reading. The majority are words that are common to the student that they either know fully or can guess at as they are going through with cognates. Even the word team square, they might not know what it is as far as a business is concerned, but they can read it in English. And I think probably the hardest part of this question was the question, in that the answers were all in French, and they had to know a lot of related details in order to eliminate what was not correct in this situation. But when you go back to the narrative itself, you are looking at fairly simplistic sentences. These are not difficult sentences. They are singular sentences. The first one, it does have a phrase in the beginning, here at Team Square. Other than that, it is a straight-on sentence. We are looking for new, energetic, and enthusiastic employees. It's a basic sentence. The next sentence, we need a commercial engineer. A simple sentence. This individual will be responsible for Microsoft accounts. Again, a simple sentence. This does not indicate a higher level. It has brought this passage down into the intermediate low as opposed to the intermediate mid. Remember that 2/3 of our questions at checkpoint B, category 1 and 2, must be in the intermediate low range, and only 1/3 will be in the intermediate high, which is the target range for checkpoint B. As you continue, go ahead, Lou.
I also, as not a very good French speaker, I also point out the fact that when Greg said that this is together, our question and our passage makes our range, our level. Okay. I also think that we need to tell our students or help our students to say sometimes the options themselves also function to bring down the level from a mid to a low, or raise it. Because when I look at the options here and I think about, professor, there's nothing in here that says that I want to be a teacher. And the same would be true about enseigner, to teach. So I think that the distractors also should be a consideration in determining the level of or the target for our proficiency level, and not just the passage or just the question, but the options too.
So as a student who was preparing themselves to listen to this passage, remember this is a listening comprehension passage, a good strategy, I would assume you would advise, is to review the answer choices as early as possible before the passage is read to them so that they know what to listen for. And if they don't hear something about a professor of mathematics or teaching English, they know the word teach, they know the verb teach, they know mathematica, they know these words. Sorry to use a Spanish example, that was my background. They know these verbs, and then when they don't hear those verbs in the passage, that should be a nice clue to say, okay, what I did hear Microsoft, I did hear engineer, and now we're putting things together.
And most definitely, Greg, I feel is very important for the student to read the question before listening to the either the audio or the teacher giving this listening, because it does exactly that. It tunes them in to what they're listening for. But for me, one of the most critical things that I would tell students is this passage is read twice. And I don't want to see any pencils in any hands, any pens in any hands until after I have read that passage twice. And you can't just tell a student that on the day of the exam, because let's face it, students are students. They half listen half the time. That means a quarter of the time you're actually reaching them. So it's something that you need to start from September when you start practicing this, and you say to them, I'm here. I am not continuing until I see all pens and pencils on your desk, all eyes on me. If you're looking at me, I know you're listening to me. You're not reading something. All right. So they're not reading that question while, and if you do see a student who's doing that, I used to just say, stop. I'm in my practice at this point in time. And I'll say, stop. I'm not continuing. I don't have everybody's attention. And then they self-police and they say, hey, Tom, she's told you how many times? Don't read the question while she's talking. It's wonderful because they do. They police themselves. And what's happening? They're learning early on that they need to listen intently. And they've already read the question once. And then when you're done with that, then they go back and they reread that question. And now it's much easier for them to answer it.
You know what, too, if I could add something to that, we just assume that kids listen, that the kids know how to listen. But I think you actually have to train them how to listen to something without giving them the question at the same time. It's a process where you begin by just listening to a passage. You may stop and interrupt after kids have listened and say, let's discuss this, and then present the question. If that makes sense. I truly think that we have to, help our kids to find a way to listen effectively. And for some kids, they can listen and read the question at the same time. Other kids cannot do both listening and reading and comprehending at the same time. And in the case where the questions are in the target language, I always tried to tell them, don't attempt to translate, because you can't listen, read, and translate all at once. Those are 3 skills you're working on trying to do it once.
I'd like to add something real quick about the proficiency levels and how to determine what level. I was just thinking, so to me, one thing that I really look at is how much a student needs to understand of the passage itself. So when you're looking at the lower levels, the novice high, even into the, some of the easier intermediate low, the student really doesn't need to understand the whole passage. They need to be able to pick out certain words that will lend them to the topic or certain pieces of information. When you're getting up into intermediate low, they're going to be understanding some sentences, but they might not understand how they connect together. And then getting up to intermediate mid, they kind of understand the gist of the passage so that they could point out what's the main idea. So really you're looking at how much can they understand is one of the ways that I look at it as well. So
And I'll add one more thing to think about. There's a lot of things to think about in case you guys didn't understand that yet. And that is how familiar the content is to the student or how close the content is to the student's life. When you're in the novice level, you're looking more for things that the student is very familiar with. When you're dealing with a novice high level question or passage that you're selecting, it's things that are about themselves, about their family, about their school day, their interests, their hobbies, very close to their daily life. When you get into the intermediate low level and even somewhat into the mid level, you're stepping outside maybe their daily life and getting into things that are somewhat familiar, but not on a daily basis. You might be talking about a concert that you're going to attend, plan a place that you're going to vacation to. Um, those are the things that I can come up with off the cuff right now. And then if you're getting into the intermediate high or even into the advanced low, more checkpoint C level things, then you're getting into professional vernacular and terminology that's more nuanced. You're getting into the planet and other countries and comparisons, and just things that are much more removed from what a student is very familiar with in their daily life. So that's just another layer of things to add into the overall formula when you're thinking about the proficiency level that you might be targeting when you're writing your own questions or evaluating questions that you've seen other people write or that appear on our exams.
Any final questions out there?
We are past just a moment or two after 5 o'clock, and I want to be very respectful of people's time. So if you'd like to stay on and ask questions, feel free to continue putting them into the Q&A. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. If you think of questions later, feel free to use those email addresses that we have listed on the screen there. But with that, officially, everyone who stayed this long can earn full CTLE credit. And we'll stick around if you have any other questions you want to ask. Thank you to everyone that did attend. We hope this was very useful to you. Thank you, all three of you, for all the preparation you did for this. This is a long time in the making. The other ones that we've done, I feel like we could have done at any time. This one, we've been working diligently for like a year to hone our own understanding to even be ready to make and present something like this. So this was awesome. Good job, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.
thank you.
Well, we'll see everyone back at the ranch tomorrow. Thanks everyone for attending. Have a great night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.